this is another one of those indie comics that I came across completely by accident and did the thing where see it on the shelf, look at it, see the title, the no ones, what is that? What's that all about? Flip through it. I was like, okay, seems kind of interesting. Let me go ahead and pick it up. And I'm glad I did because this is a book that I really enjoyed. Now, as far as whether or not I'll be able to get a hold of any more of these, that remains to be seen, because I would have thought that the second issue would have been out by now, but I could be wrong. But apparently there's not a whole lot, and I didn't know this prior to getting this issue. There's not a whole lot of these out there. It's a pretty limited print run from what it seems like. So I managed to get, this was the last issue on the shelf, and I was pretty lucky to get it because it looks like this issue is going for upwards of $10, 10 and up from what I'm seeing online. On the shelf, of course, buying it from the store, $4, but it seems to be going up in price for whatever reason. I guess a lot of people like it. I liked it. I thought it was good. But this is The No Ones by Jim Krueger. Don't know the artist, Welby. I don't know who that is. Don't think I've seen their art before, but it's that kind of gritty art style that I think probably fits best with stories like this. So this is a story about a group of superheroes called the Bastions. So I guess you could say that they're this world's kind of Justice League or Avengers, however you want to look at it. And basically, they have some interesting powers. The Bar is their leader, and he uses some kind of powered up bar. I'll go ahead and get close in here so you guys can see. Muse, who I guess her powers are kind of magic. Well, I'll say probably illusion based type of powers. We have this guy named Call, who is, I guess his name used to be Kid Cauldron when he was younger, and it's just Call for short now because he can incinerate people, basically make them into dust. There is a character here named Omen, and what's interesting about her is that she appears, she's invisible all the time. She's invisible all the time, but when there's danger, she becomes visible. So I guess that's the purpose of her name, Omen, is to kind of show there's a bad omen happening. It's to show that there's danger. This character is interesting. His name is Halfling. He basically just think of Multiple Man from the Marvel Universe, from X-Men X Factor. He's kind of like that, except he becomes, when there's multiple versions of him, they're usually like different sizes or different parts of him. So, but they all have sentience, kind of like Multiple Man, where they have sentience and can think for themselves and things like that. So that's interesting. And then we have Flock, who is, she has the power, it seems like, to control birds, especially, particularly it looks like ravens and crows maybe. And then there's Ripple, who of course has the power to kind of send this kind of, these kind of ripple waves that basically can destroy things on a molecular level. But they're the team here, the Bastions, they're this world's heroes, and obviously they're revered. What's interesting though is that they're very much in the spotlight, to the point where they kind of they kind of revel in that a little bit, in the fact that they're in the spotlight. But behind the scenes, not everything is all that great. They obviously all have a lot of problems. And they're interesting problems too. That's one of the things that I really liked about reading through this, was some of the interesting aspects of their problems. So we see here that apparently Muse and the Bar are or were married, or I believe they still are married, and they want to keep that kind of public perception that they're still married, that everything's fine, that everything's hunky-dory in their marriage, and they're a happily married couple, and they're also a part of this team. With Halfling, something very interesting with him is that apparently one of his parts, or one of his halflings, died, and he reintegrated it, and it seems to be causing some kind of post-traumatic stress for him. He seems to be having some issues dealing with that. It reminds me a lot of back in the day, there was an issue of X Factor where Multiple Man, one of his multiples, was killed, and it caused a a bit of an issue for him for a little bit, because I think there was even a point in time where he was questioning if maybe it wasn't the multiple that was killed, if maybe the real him was killed and the multiple lived, or something like that. I can't remember. It was such a long time ago. That was in the 90s during the X Factor run. But it kind of reminded me of that, because he seems to be having difficulty with it, because apparently that's something that hadn't happened before. He had never reintegrated a part of himself that was dead. So literally a part of him died. So there's this bit of a I guess a little bit of an inner struggle going on with him because of it, and he's having to cope with it in a way. I think the most interesting character in this, and I'm not sure if he's the main character, is Call, the guy who has the ability to disintegrate people, because he apparently has, for lack of a better way to put it, he apparently has schizophrenia. He hears voices, and he'll talk to them. And he acknowledges the fact that he talks to those voices in his head, because the rest of the team has brought it up to him, and like, hey, who are you talking to? This, that, or the other. And he just outright admits, yeah, that there's voices in my head. There's voices in my head. So they haven't explained what it is that might have caused that trauma for him, but it'll be interesting to see if I'm able to get the second issue. I'll be very interested to see where that whole story goes. But basically, so the team goes to, they get an emergency call. They go to deal with this problem. What ends up happening, though, is they end up killing an innocent bystander. And unlike what any normal superhero team would do, which would be the right thing to kind of take responsibility for the fact they did it, they cover it up. They say, you know what, we can't let the public learn about this because it might change their perception of us. So they make a judgment call and decide to just go ahead and cover it up. They use Muse's powers to kind of, because with Muse's powers, because they're kind of these illusionary powers, they can kind of make people see what they want them to see. So there's a little bit of a conflict here in the team, because this has never happened before, where some of them are like, well, this is not really doing the right thing, but they're like, well, we have to do this, kind of like we have to keep the image of the team all well and good. But what's interesting, though, is after that whole ordeal, after they've killed this innocent bystander, something very interesting happens. And that is the fact that from literally, it looks like from one day to the next, they wake up the next day, they go out into the public, and nobody knows who they are. So I guess that's where the namesake of the book comes from, the No Ones. Nobody has ever heard of them. Nobody has ever seen them before. They're completely unfamiliar with them. The only ones that know who they are is the team. Like, the team recognizes each other, they know each other, but nobody else in the world seemingly so far knows who they are. It's like they don't exist. And they go around to different places telling people, like, even in this case, like with the best example, I guess, is with Flock. Flock goes home to her family, wakes up the next morning, and even her own parents and her brother don't recognize her. They have no clue who she is, what she's doing there. And she's like, I'm your daughter. And they're like, they're not having it. They're just like, call the cops. So it's crazy. But again, the only ones that know for sure is the team themselves. The team recognizes each other, and it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here, what the whole intent is here of this story. Like, they're basically now in a world that's completely forgotten them, and is it because of the person they killed? Did that person have powers? Is it a villain at work? It makes you question a bunch of things. Like, is this something that will be good for them, bad for them? Who knows? That's the whole intriguing aspect, I think, of this book, and why I definitely want to continue reading it. I just hope that I could get a hold of the second issue, because, like I said, this seems to be something that's in limited run. Not a whole lot of these are being printed out, so I would assume that the same is going to be the case for... it's going to be the same thing, I should say, probably for the second issue. It's probably going to be a little bit harder to get when it does come out, if it isn't already out, and I just haven't managed to find it at any of the comic book shops I've been to. So, like this one just kind of came out of nowhere, found it. I'm already intrigued by it, looking forward to seeing what happens in the next issue. and hopefully I could find it. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, if you have any recommendations, please be sure to leave them in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification, or I should say hit the bell for notifications, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until next time, the hunt continues.